Okay, on your live.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and very warm winter welcome to all of you. We are back on our lectures. We are continuing our discussion on international relations. आपका पेपर जो है Introduction to International Relations हम लोग वो पेपर कर रहे हैं and so far we have almost covered 2 units, all right, and 3 units are there in your syllabus जिसमें से हम almost 2 units कर चुके हैं. Very last leg of the second unit we are going to do today, and tomorrow we will continue with the third part, that is the foreign policy. Yes, foreign policy, that's the only one which is left. और अभी तक हम लोगों ने पहला यूनिट यानी कि जो थ्योरी है अबाउट इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस वो किया है कवर, एंड देन मूविंग ऑन आफ्टर डूइंग द थ्योरी वी वेंट टू वी डिड कोल्ड वॉर. कोल्ड वॉर किसको कहते हैं, व्हाट इज द ओरिजिन ऑफ कोल्ड वॉर, व्हाट इज द रेलेवेंस, एंड यू नो इफ द कोल्ड वॉर हैज एंडेड, अगर एंड हो गया तो उसके बाद क्या हुआ, दैट इज द पोस्ट कोल्ड वॉर ईरा. वो डिस्कशन हम लोगों की अभी चल रही है. वी कवर्ड कि पोस्ट कोल्ड वॉर ईरा में पॉलिटिक्स और इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस किस तरह से चेंज हो रहे हैं, यू नो, विद द चेंजिंग वर्ल्ड. जो नेचर ऑफ इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस आल्सो चेंज्ड अ लॉट, एंड दैट चेंज इज रिफ्लेक्टेड इन आल्सो द इंटरनल पॉलिटिक्स एंड द डायनामिक्स विद इन द वर्ल्ड स्टेज. पहले जो सुपर पावर्स थे उनमें से एक क्रम्बल डाउन कर गया, दैट इज यूएसएसआर. उसके डिसइंटीग्रेट होने के बाद 1991 के बाद जो पॉलिटिकल सीन है, चाहे वो एशिया में हो, अफ्रीका में हो, यूरोप में हो, हर जगह एक बहुत मेजर चेंज नजर आया. सबसे पहला चेंज तो था दैट यूएस समवेयर assumed the supreme position. US became the sole superpower, obviously, because dismantling of USSR was by far also seen as a kind of triumph or victory for US, right? और ये जो उनका सुपर पावर होने का जो assumption है that they are the leader or they are at the top of the game, that still continues even after so many years, 1991 के बाद भी. लेकिन साथ ही साथ में एक और चीज जो हुई वो ये है that the world somehow has come out of the bipolar system. As I explained earlier, there are 3 systems: unipolar, bipolar and multipolar system, where the power is concentrated. जब वो एक ही पावर सेंटर होता है we call it a unipolar system. जब वो 2 पावर सेंटर्स होते हैं we call them bipolar system. And when we have several, you know, multiple pockets of power is distributed or decentralized, then we say it's a multipolar system. So somewhere ये जो बाइपोलर सिस्टम था जो कि पोस्ट 1945 सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद उभर के आया था यूएस और यूएसएसआर के रूप में, वो जो बाइपोलर सिस्टम है दैट समहाउ हैज कम टू एन एंड. दो यूएस इज स्टिल द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट वन एंड assumes the leadership of the world, but at the same time we also realize that this bloc politics has somehow ended and the power is now more decentralized. It's a multipolar world now. We don't say it's a bipolar world anymore, we say it's a multipolar world जहाँ पे नए नए बहुत तरह के पावर सेंटर्स इमर्ज कर रहे हैं. इंडिया, चाइना, रशिया, जापान, you know, Germany, all these countries have their own achievements, their own contribution to the world economic system, right? So when the economic system, क्योंकि अब एक चीज आपको और समझने की जरूरत है that now the bigger change in world politics is that it is not only based on the political alliance anymore. It is not about the relationship only within the states, but rather the relationship is more of economic alliance. अभी जो सारा accent है यूएसएसआर क्रम्बल डाउन होने का, देखिए कल हम लोगों ने जब डिस्कस किया, if you can see my screen now, what we did yesterday was I introduced you to the post cold war era. हम post cold war era किसको कहते हैं? वॉर यानी हम सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर से शुरू करते हैं अपनी कहानी, एंड देन पोस्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर ईरा होता है 1991 के बाद. और वहां तक हम कैसे पहुंचे? द मेजर चेंज वाज इंपॉर्टेंट डेवलपमेंट्स ड्यूरिंग द एंड ऑफ कोल्ड वॉर. कोल्ड वॉर का एंड कैसे हुआ? द फर्स्ट मेजर डेवलपमेंट वाज डिसोल्यूशन ऑफ यूएसएसआर. नाउ as far as the dissolution of USSR, disintegration of USSR concerned, we also studied it under 2 levels. That there were 2 major reasons why it crumbled down. One was domestic, and that domestic only led to the external. Now what was that domestic reason? It was perhaps the economic stagnation, non-visible economic growth. इकोनॉमी उनकी क्रम्बल डाउन कर गई और इसकी वजह से ये इकोनॉमिक प्रेशर ही था सबसे ज्यादा जो सोवियत यूनियन को मजबूर कर दिया ये सोचने के लिए that we can't go ahead with the aids and funds we have been doing for our alliances or allies, और हमारे जो फ्रेंड्स हैं उनको साथ में रखने के लिए they were investing a lot in spreading the ideology communism. ठीक है, तो ये जो फैक्टर है ये इतना स्ट्रांग हो गया दैट एक पॉइंट पे जब सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर हुआ था तब सबने रियलाइज किया था, देखिए फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर के टाइम एवरीबॉडी रियलाइज्ड दैट पावर होना जरूरी है, एक्सपेंशन होना जरूरी है, पॉलिटिकल कंट्रोल होना जरूरी है. सो पॉलिटिकली अपने आप को स्ट्रांग नेशन बनाना जरूरी है. ऑलराइट, सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद देयर वाज अ रियलाइजेशन इन द वर्ल्ड कि मिलिट्री पावर होना जरूरी है. If you are strong militarily, nobody can do anything to it. So political angle shifted to military angle post Second World War, right? Because they thought अब अगर हमने अपने आप को militarily secure नहीं किया, then any country or any nation can come and control us. और उसी रीजन से ये जो bipolar system है, 2 ब्लॉक का सिस्टम है, वो बना रहा, right? And then post Cold War we see that the most important reason became the economic reason. Because now they understood that even if you have military might, जैसे कि यूएसएसआर के पास था, the development doesn't come on its own. It's the economic system which provides certain kind of development to the nation state. And because यूएसएसआर की इकोनॉमी इतनी स्ट्रांग नहीं थी, वो क्रम्बल डाउन कर गई and also that is dismantled. So now the rule of the international relations was having a sound economic system. Military पे जितना स्पेंड करते हैं या politically अपने connections बना के रखने के लिए जितना स्पेंड करते हैं उससे ज़्यादा जरूरी हो गया that you should have a good economic system. And with the crumble of the communism or communist thinking, socialism as a system, capitalism emerged very victorious. कैपिटलिज्म यानी पूंजीवाद. ये जो हमने कोल्ड वॉर की बात की, सिर्फ और यूएसए और यूएसएसआर के बीच में जो अनबन थी या जो शीत युद्ध चल रहा था, दैट इज ऑल्सो पार्टली बिकॉज ऑफ द डिफरेंट आइडियोलॉजीज. 2 विचारधाराओं की लड़ाई थी. तो जब यूएसएसआर डिसइंटीग्रेट हो गया तो ये विचारधाराएं भी कहीं ना कहीं जो पूंजीवाद विचारधारा है, कैपिटलिज्म है, दैट इमर्ज्ड विक्टोरियस. तो वर्ल्ड ओवर उनको समर्थन मिल गया. अर्लियर जो लोग सोशलिज्म में विश्वास भी रखते थे, दोस कंट्रीज आल्सो स्टार्टेड अडॉप्टिंग कैपिटलिज्म एज देयर इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम, एंड पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम में डेमोक्रेसी जो है वो धीरे धीरे ज्यादा पॉपुलर होता गया. ऑलराइट, सो पोस्ट कोल्ड वॉर ईरा जब हम डिस्कस करते हैं सबसे पहले हम वो रीजंस आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं दोस व्हिच लेड टू द एंड ऑफ कोल्ड वॉर. कोल्ड वॉर की एंड कैसे हुई? ओके, सो उसमें सबसे पहले आता है डिसोल्यूशन ऑफ यूएसएसआर क्यों हुआ, व्हिच वी डिस्कस्ड यस्टरडे. मूविंग अहेड वी आल्सो डिस्कस फॉल ऑफ बर्लिन वॉल एंड यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी. फॉल ऑफ बर्लिन वॉल, सिर्फ बर्लिन वॉल यानी जर्मनी में जो बर्लिन वॉल है उसको ना देखा जाए, इट वाज आल्सो द एंड ऑफ आइडियोलॉजिकल डिबेट. जर्मनी जो है वो 2 पार्ट्स में ईस्ट और वेस्ट में डिवाइडेड था क्योंकि 1961 से दे वर डिवाइडेड क्योंकि ये विचारधाराओं का डिवीजन था. एक वेस्टर्न अलायंस सिस्टम से जुड़ा हुआ था और एक ईस्टर्न यानी रशिया के साथ, यूएसएसआर के साथ। सो ये जो क्रम्बल डाउन हुआ यूएसएसआर का और उन्होंने अपनी पॉलिटिकल लिबरलाइजेशन की तरफ जाना चाहा, उसका इम्पैक्ट जर्मनी में भी देखने को मिला। एंड बर्लिन वॉल जो है इट क्रम्बल डाउन एंड देयर वाज अ यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी, जर्मनी बिकेम वन, ईस्ट एंड वेस्ट बिकेम वन। सो दैट हैड अ लॉट ऑफ इम्पैक्ट ऑन अदर कंट्रीज लाइक पोलैंड, हंगरी और ईस्ट जर्मनी में भी बहुत अनरेस्ट हुआ। धीरे धीरे एक सिस्टम जो चेंज होता है, इट्स अ ग्रेजुअल चेंज, वन चेंज लीड्स टू अनदर। ये चीज हम लोगों ने डिस्कस की विद द फॉल ऑफ जर्मन बर्लिन वॉल और द यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी। बहुत सारे पीसफुल ट्रांजिशन देखने को मिले, सिस्टम चेंज देखने को मिला, जैसे कि चेकोस्लोवाकिया में, यूगोस्लाविया में, बहुत जगह पे कुछ कंट्रीज डिवाइड हो गई, कुछ कंट्रीज बिकेम टुगेदर, देयर वाज इकोनॉमिक ट्रांजिशन, देयर वाज पॉलिटिकल ट्रांजिशन, सो लॉट ऑफ चेंजेस सडनली, इट हैड अ ग्रेट इम्पैक्ट ऑन दीस स्मॉल कंट्रीज स्पेशली, राइट? दिस वी हैड डिस्कस्ड यस्टरडे। बहुत सारे हमने एग्जांपल्स देखे, चेकोस्लोवाकिया जैसे मैं कह रही हूं, ईस्ट तिमोर, सर्बिया, बहुत छोटे-छोटे कंट्रीज सब जो हैं वो अपने आप इंडिपेंडेंट नेशन के रूप में उभरी। दे रियलाइज दैट वी नीड टू हैव अ सिस्टम ऑफ आवर ओन, अगर हमें सस्टेन करना है, हम सिर्फ इस तरह से सुपर पावर्स पे निर्भर नहीं रह सकते। तब तक दे वर डिपेंडिंग ऑन यूएसएसआर। नाउ यूएसएसआर बैक्ड ऑफ एंड इट क्रम्बल्ड, तो अब वो क्या करते थे, हैड टू स्टैंड ऑन देयर ओन। सो obviously UN membership बढ़ गई, so many independent nations came into existence, so lot of it was game changing, right? Because बहुत सारे नए nations जिनका नामो निशान तब तक नहीं था, suddenly the map exploded with these newly independent nations everywhere. Okay, third point जो हमने डिस्कस किया कि end of Cold War में एक और change, bigger change which we saw was this is called the new great game. Now this is in context with the Central Asian region. अभी तक हम जितनी भी बात कर रहे थे, हम यूरोप की बात कर रहे थे, चाहे वो ईस्ट यूरोप हो या वेस्ट यूरोप हो, क्योंकि वो directly they were in contact with the superpowers. Now after Cold War was ended, or let's say it was ending, suddenly there was a realization कि Central Asian region जो है वो उभर के आया कि ये एक mineral rich region है and strategic region है to enter this area. Asia was not only rich minerally but also geopolitically it has a very strategic location. So all the countries they wanted to have a certain control over here, and that led to the new game which is called the new great game which started. Now obviously रशिया हैड अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग होल्ड इन द सेंट्रल एशियन रीजन, को इसलिए क्योंकि जितनी भी ये कंट्रीज हैं, छोटी छोटी कंट्रीज हैं, जितनी भी सेंट्रल एशियन रीजन्स हैं, मोस्टली दे आर लैंड लॉक्ड कंट्रीज, उज्बेकिस्तान, कजाकिस्तान, पार्ट ऑफ अफगानिस्तान, पार्ट पाकिस्तान, एंड समटाइम्स नॉर्थ इंडिया इज आल्सो पार्ट ऑफ दैट सेंट्रल एशियन रीजन. सो ऑल ऑफ देम आर लैंड लॉक्ड कंट्री, दे डोंट हैव ओपनिंग टू द सी. And so Russia becomes very important in the sense रशिया से होकर ही उनको कोई भी सी आउटलेट मिलता है to have any kind of transaction with other countries, right? So रशिया से ही सारे ट्रेड रूट्स जाते हैं and also the oil pipelines they pass through Russia. So now they started looking for alternatives. They thought that हम लोगों को now we have to look for alternatives, alternative routes, so that we don't remain dependent on Russia alone. And they have their good relations, so they started looking around other neighbors. So China now again plays a very important role here, and China's Belt and Road Initiative, if you can see here, Belt and Road Initiative, we talked about it yesterday, that this is a project where China is trying to build a certain link with Europe. It's trying to build a kind of a corridor with Europe, and this is the revival of old great game as it was called between Britain and Russia. Now it's between China and Russia, China versus everyone else actually. So this is the new great game where it is trying to influence, and अगर influence negotiation नहीं होता है, then take over, and through by all means it's trying to build its way through the Central Asian region to Europe. It's trying to connect. So this is the biggest new great game which is played across, and that's why US later everybody, all the big powers are feeling a little threatened from China because of its Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, and surpassing everyone, and it is located in a very strategic location. That's why it's able to negotiate well with the Central Asian regions. And obviously this Eurasian landmass is very very center controlled. If China is able to have a certain corridor built in that, then definitely US and other Western powers are in trouble. Okay, this is what we had discussed yesterday. Now what happened during end of Cold War? Another thing is beginning of democratic era. So now today we are going to continue with this, and we'll go ahead with other points as well. Okay, all right. So beginning of democratic era. I'm reading from the paper. You can also see the dissolution of USSR and collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe also marked an uprising in democratic political environment across the world, especially in the newly formed states. तब तक जितने भी कम्युनिस्ट कंट्रीज थे, ऑफ कोर्स दे डोंट बिलीव इन डेमोक्रेसी, सो आइडियल्स लाइक डेमोक्रेसी एंड फ्रीडम वर नेवर टॉक्ड अबाउट. ऑलराइट, दे वर नेवर द आंसर, बिकॉज विद इन द कम्युनिस्ट रेजिम सामने बाद में क्या होता है कि इट्स द वन पार्टी व्हिच कंट्रोल्स एवरीथिंग. Economy, political moves, ideological moves, everything is controlled. It's kind of a totalitarian region, though it's very different from totalitarianism, but everything is under national control. So democracy is not which is proposed, because they don't trust everybody, they trust only the few chosen ones within the party to rule. So ये और versus the western countries उस समय सब liberal democracy में transition हो चुका था, industrialization आ चुकी थी, modernization हो चुका था, तो obviously they were all liberal democracy and freedom was experienced. So the ideals like democracy and freedom, I'm reading from here, the ideals like democracy and freedom were emphasized in every aspect of life. Suddenly ये नया जो एक idea है कि हम भी democracy होंगे, people should have rule rather than a party or rather than few people in control. So similarly, in non-democratic regions, जहाँ democracy नहीं था, aspirations of democratic political governance were steadily increasing. Okay, so most of the newly formed countries were underdeveloped and needed economic transformations, mostly determined by Western idea of economic development, which was greatly influenced by the principle of free market capitalism. Okay, so not only that कि democracy चाहिए या freedom चाहिए, they also needed some kind of economic elevation. The reason being that they were very underdeveloped. Okay, since they were so underdeveloped, the economic restructuring could not come with particularly socialism. So they were greatly influenced by the principles of free market capitalism. क्योंकि liberal democracy के साथ साथ ये economic system भी आता है. So thus, reading from here, thus liberal democracy and free market economy became the accepted political and economic systems. So पूरा world जो है धीरे-धीरे आप देखेंगे post Cold War, ये दो systems जो अब hardly कोई country होगी, very few those who do not practice democracy in some or the other form, and also economic system में सब जगह capitalism है. अब बहुत कम countries होंगी where economic system is very different, but otherwise everybody has accepted the new norm, that is capitalism. So thus the basic characteristic of post Cold War international system was the spread of free market capitalism and democracy with its emphasis on elections and human rights. ये सारी जो बातें करते हैं, ये उस समय बिल्कुल कोई नहीं करता था. Now these were the talk of the town. We have to talk about human rights, we have to talk about elections, we have to talk about people's part, etc. etc. All right. This is one of the characteristics again. Now fifth one is deepening of economic independence. अब ये देखते हैं क्या है. The end of Cold War, in addition to the collapse of ideology of socialism and socialist bloc, coincided with the acceleration of process of economic globalization. ये शुरुआत है एक ऐसे globalization की, एक ऐसा सिस्टम और एक ऐसा प्रोसेस जिसमें पूरा वर्ल्ड जो है somehow they experience growth together, okay, especially economic growth. So end of Cold War, जब उनको बहुत सारे जो कंट्रीज हैं they came out of the clutches of socialism and socialist bloc ended completely, USSR खत्म हो गया, तो इकोनॉमिक ग्लोबलाइजेशन ने उसकी जगह ले ली. ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज अ मेजर प्रोसेस इन द फॉर्म ऑफ रैपिड ग्रोथ इन इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमिक एंड ट्रेड रिलेशंस and deepening of interdependence on one hand and great technological milestones in information and communication technologies on the other. So globalization क्या है? It's basically an exchange, okay, where all the countries became dependent on each other. So we are using the word interdependence here कि technologically we also become interdependent, information communication technologies में भी and trade relations में भी. All right. So these developments resulted in the emergence of new concept called global village. हम post 1990s की बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ 91 92, that 90s era. So that was also the time जब globalization उभर के आया first time. Everybody came to know there is something called the process of globalization where the world is brought together, and that's why a new concept called global village emerged. This global village as the interconnectivity in terms of manufacturing and trade as well as communication. It created new forms of web-based connectivity. First time internet, digital globalization happened in terms of internet. We saw political globalization. A lot of new groups were formed. Countries coming together and forming G20, BRICS, ये सब की शुरुआत नहीं पड़ गई थी उस समय. Then we have all these economic globalization, obviously, new trade activities, new trade relations. So since the process of interconnectivity was global in nature and spread across the streams of social, cultural, economic, technological, and political, the process also came to be known as globalization. So globalization has led to rise of new actors such as non-governmental organizations, multinational corporations. These actors have acquired important role in determining the relations between nation states. They are transnational in nature, inspired by free enterprise and free trade, and less accountable. So the major thing with globalization is that the actors, number of actors increased in the world. पहले कौन था? State. Nation state was the sole actor till Second World War. During the Cold War period also, it was the state which played a major role determining its relationships and also its connection with the other countries, other nation states. But now, because of globalization, MNCs आ गई. Suddenly NGOs जो हैं वो बहुत they became very very powerful, and they also became an instrument for globalization because NGOs में क्या हुआ? For example, the Oxfam and all these NGOs, what do? They have several centers in different countries. That's how they also kind of connect the countries together. So MNCs also, because they opened offices everywhere, so the world opened. All right, there was a possibility of more connections rather than relying only on one actor called state. We have other actors which started playing a major role in establishing new kind of relations within the nation state. All right, this is what happened. So globalization is one of the economic interdependence. We say this globalization is basically economic interdependence. Now it's very difficult to think of going back to the period where all the nations were isolated from each other, capsuled, and they were developing. It's very important to go back. We can't even think of because we are so much so in the globalized era. And some of you as students, you are born in this era of economic interdependence and you are born in these NGO and MNCs era. So obviously now it's very very important for all the states to also participate in this process so that development doesn't stay far from them. They don't stay away from any progress or development. Okay. Now this is how end of Cold War is what we can describe. ये जो 5 points हैं इनके द्वारा हम explain कर सकते हैं कि Cold War कैसे end हुआ and what were the immediate reasons and what were the immediate consequences. Now there are certain characteristics in the post Cold War era जो कि हमें वर्ल्ड में देखने को मिलते हैं. Quickly we'll take a look at that. All right, I'm reading as you can see my screen now. Characteristics of post Cold War era. There are certain prominent characteristics of the post Cold War international system. Though the Cold War period had created a bipolar world order where the actions of the states were predictable and the actors in the international system were also supportive of the state actions. The Cold War period that way brought status quo and stability to the international system. At one point of time, because it was bipolar, so things were stable. Either आप इस विचारधारा के साथ हैं या उस विचारधारा के साथ हैं, things were smooth. However, the fall of communism, it created a vacuum and left the world unipolar, with US as the sole superpower and leader of the free capitalism and liberal democracy. Now during the Cold War, the world order was divided on the ideologies of capitalism and communism. Both were functional during the Cold War. But the end of Cold War brought an end to this ideological division too. So hence, the first characteristic of post-Cold War era is the dominance of free market capitalism. It is since then seen as a major tool, approach, and an important means to achieve economic development. All right. Majority of the countries who adopted communism or socialism to achieve economic development have turned around to embrace capitalist ideology. Right? Correct? Okay. So second one. Now, end of Cold War is also seen as heralding of individual freedom and democracy. So these freedoms range from economic, social, cultural, and political. All these freedoms are to be supported by rights, adhikar. So both the freedoms and rights, स्वतंत्रता और अधिकार, are to be supported by political institutions, which are basically democratic. स्वतंत्रता और अधिकार जो है, इनका experience आप किसी और political system में नहीं कर सकते, other than democracy. The second characteristic, तो क्या होता है? Second characteristic of post-Cold War was the outbreak of third wave of democratization. ये term बहुत important है. Third wave of democratization. It was used by Samuel P. Huntington. He put it as like third wave of democratization. Liberal democracy in the minimal meaning of electoral contest spread to Southeast Asia. India में भी आया. All the countries in Southeast Asia, North Asia, South Asia, Africa and Latin America. All these were basically the countries which were colonized, who were under the influence of domination and majorly exploited. इनमें जो है democratic charge जो है वो गया and these they adopted and minimal जो है elections करके free fair election करके democracy को establish करना. This was third wave of democratization, which was spread of democracy across these underdeveloped countries. Okay, East European countries that also underwent varieties of color revolution, pink revolution, blue revolution. ऐसे revolutions भी हुए. Those to some degree, they were adopting democracy. Some years later, very important development was Arab Spring, 2010 में. Arab Spring bloomed in the West Asian region. We all know that West Asian region is the region where monarchy is still maintained. Monarchy majorly, it's a monarchical structure which we can see in the world. But many places elections were held. In many countries, first time democratic governments came to power and completed their term without facing a military coup. So West Asia में जब democracy की entrance हुई, उसको हम Arab Spring कहते हैं. That first time this West Asian countries or the Arabian countries, Arab countries, they also experienced democracy to some extent. New constitutions were written, judiciary became independent, rule of law prevailed. Rather than king having his or her order, then rule of law prevailed. So right to vote was expanded in most countries and covered women. Indigenous and marginalized people or excluded sections of the society were also covered, and they were given some benefits, they were given some recognition, some rights, and democratic institutions were established which worked well. Okay, so this was third wave of democratization, okay, second characteristic. Now let's move to third characteristic. The third characteristic of post-Cold War era uh, is the rapid growth in international trade. Now international trade was booming at that time because globalization भी आ गया, capitalism भी आ गया, free trade है, तो obviously international trade बढ़ गया, आपस में लोगों का exchanges जो है it grew. So formation of the WTO, World Trade Organization, marked the rise of a rule-based multilateral trade order. The increased international trade allowed the countries to become interdependent, एक दूसरे पे depend करना, and to forge economic relations. Naturally, जितना जितना trade होगा, countries में उतना exchanges बढ़ गया. So this swift turn from traditional relations, which focused on interactions between governments, has allowed economic relations between private players. Global corporate and banking interests emerged as extremely powerful economic players. Foreign economic relations have become dominant over other traditional issues like defense and border security, etc. Now they are not that important, but economic relations are more important, as we discussed earlier also. So increased trade, international trade, has softened the rigid boundaries between the states and allowed free flow of goods, capital, human resources, forging new links between the states. Now we see a lot of people are going to US, Australia, UK, and all other countries to work. Migration we see Canada and everywhere people are migrating. So human resources भी इधर उधर जा रहे हैं. Boundary जो है, that doesn't remain a very strict boundary now. States do have a boundary, and there was a feeling of outside and inside, foreigners and the natives, but now that has completely shrunk because those boundaries have become very fluid. कोई कहीं जाके रह रहा है, कोई वहाँ खरीद रहा है, वहाँ से कर रहे हैं. Goods are continuously, they are being exchanged and they are exported, and new regulations have emerged. WTO is regulating it. Regulation institutions are also there. So this is not like on the personal benefit of any particular investor or a business house, but rather it is regulated at a very international level. और उसको protect करने के लिए बहुत सारे different institutions भी हैं. So capital का flow भी बढ़ गया, economy boom कर रही है इसी वजह से, because international trade जो है वो new order का एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा बन चुकी है. So political boundaries are no longer very strict and rigid, but rather very fluid. There are no rigid boundaries. There is a free flow of goods, capital, human resources, employment, migration, everything is happening. So foreign economic relations have become very dominant. अभी accent defense और military और border security से निकल के foreign economic relations पे आ गया है. जितना अच्छा आपका foreign economic relations होगा, वो country सबसे ज़्यादा development experience कर रही है right now. Okay. Now, the fourth important characteristic of post-Cold War era is the rise of new actors who are mostly non-state actors. This we have also discussed over, that the new actors like MNCs and NGOs and all the other institutions other than the state are now more important than the state themselves. These non-state actors do not have any nationality, क्योंकि particularly किसी एक चीज को पकड़ के नहीं रहे, they are very fluid. They don't have any particular nationality. They are everywhere. State identity नहीं है. They associate with the other states as well. All right. They are not controlled by any particular state. Right. So international non-governmental organizations like Amnesty International, Greenpeace, all right, they emerge championing specific issues like protection of human rights and environment. You all have heard the names of Greenpeace and Amnesty International, and the presence is seen across the world. So they don't have a boundary to themselves. They don't represent any particular country. वो जहाँ भी जिस country में होते हैं उसको represent करते हैं. And they bring with it other issues other than the military and political issues, like जैसे कि human rights है, environment है. So new issues, new actors have emerged in the world scene. The emergence of these non-state actors created several multiple linkages between the states and the non-state actors. Obviously, state और non-state के बीच में एक जो relation है वो इन्हीं की वजह से establish होता है. Now these linkages supported the cobweb paradigm. It's called the cobweb paradigm. क्या है ये? To understand international relations, the idea of international relations looking a cobweb emphasizes transnational relations supported by various civil society organizations, multinational corporations which create new forms of international society which are not bound by realist idea of national interest and sovereign states. Cobweb क्या होता है? मकड़ी का जाला, उसको हम cobweb कहते हैं. So now the world looks like a cobweb. Okay, so जैसे जैसे ये relations बढ़ रहे हैं, the cobweb is also expanding. And they are all linked together. एक जगह से अगर कड़ी टूट गई, the whole cobweb will crumble down. But very delicate relations these are, and these are not guided by the whole idea of controlling each other, but with support of each other, it's grown. You understand? That's why it's called a cobweb paradigm. मकड़ी का जाला जैसे है, उसी तरह आप imagine कीजिए, all the countries are related to each other at all the points and continuously growing their relationship with each other. And interdependence is also there. हाँ, एक जगह से अगर टूटी कड़ी तो पूरा सिस्टम crumble down कर जाएगा. So the interactions between the non-state actors and the actors also is seen like that. So they prioritize individual and community interest more rather than national interest. Realist paradigm, अगर आप लोगों को याद होगा, when we were discussing the realist theories, the main accent was that state has to protect its national interest above everything else. सबसे पहले important है अपना national interest protect करना. That was a realist idea. Now that is left far behind because now the most important thing is individual interest and community interest. So it is more human centric. Okay, the whole idea of development centers around people rather than states. Okay, now the state here would not, I'm reading from here, the state here would not act independently, rather it plays a supportive role, just like a cobweb. The result of this multiple interactions at multiple levels, सिर्फ एक state का एक से नहीं, एक का 10 से हो रहा है. So that slowly and steadily replaces the word international relations, the word international relations with world relations in understanding the phenomenal outcomes. It's just a mean to say that it is more, it's kind of a spread out now with so many actors and so many states interacting with each other, so many interdependencies everywhere. Now it's not merely international relations, it's world relations with each other. Okay. Anyway, so coming back to the fifth characteristic. The fifth characteristic of post-Cold War era is the new focus spread from world-centric to region-centric interests. इसको हम from global to local भी कहते हैं in common parlance. आप लोग भी use करते हैं of course. So these interests range from environmental issues, जो नए issues हैं, those which are touching everyday's life are more important than the big become a priority area in state actions. Okay, so politics जो है, state politics जो है, वो political clutches से बाहर निकल के now it has come to issue based. अब वो issue based है. जैसे कि these issues, for instance, the COVID-19 pandemic, it calls for lots of concerted action at regional and at global level. Okay, so you all understand that it was not possible for any one country to have controlled it, and even demand for setting up of regional mechanisms to fight these new types of non-traditional security threats is very important that everyone comes together. So अब जो talks हैं, अब जो problems हैं, वो issue based रह गए हैं. They are not about ये state इसके अंदर है, क्योंकि colonialism नहीं है, imperialism नहीं है, ये सब अब exist नहीं करता है. So अब issues जो है, वो common people के nature के common life को लेकर ज़्यादातर they are of those kind of importance. So state interests are submerged in common interests, and states have become part of collective action at a regional and global level. अब isolated state कोई नहीं exist करता. Everybody is usually a participant at the global level. Thus, the state started policy making according to this collective action, and states started seeing their national interest as part of the collective interest. Now, what has happened is states do have a national interest, उनका interest है, but they see it in a bigger picture that's located in the collective interest of the world. Okay, so some sort of common goals are identified. Let's read. Identifying, understanding, and coordinating states to achieve common goals required proactive organizations, which are universal and aloof from interest of single state. किसी एक particular state को तो ये दायित्व responsibility नहीं दी जा सकती है. So what happens is we see that the sixth important characteristic of post-Cold War era is importance of these kind of international organizations like United Nations, WTO, etc. Now these are some neutral organizations. They help in promotion of these kind of common interests. So the rise and growth of these organizations in the post-Cold War era is phenomenal, and their importance has grown rapidly. All these organizations deal with single to multiple issues of their reach range from global to regional. When they are dealing with issues like human rights, they are also reaching to the base of that state. Local level politics is dealt with, and when they are talking about international trade, they are talking in the global terms. Thus, the importance of regional organizations and regional cooperation, those kind of initiatives on multiple issues have grown immensely. So these initiatives are focused on issues ranging from easing trade to security to environment to migration at regional levels, everything. These are the new politics basically. These issues make it up for the new international relations. Okay, so all these characteristics have changed the discourse of international relations in the post-Cold War era. The end of Cold War has added uncertainty and a degree of unpredictability along with the transformative structural changes to international relations. The period is also marked by a more dynamic and intense nature of relations between the states. New types of negotiations and meetings have evolved, such as G20, BRICS, where leaders meet and discuss issues of global and regional importance. The emergence of more actors at the interactions between the states started influencing the actions of the state. The concepts of sovereignty, national interest, hard borders, etc. have become vulnerable and weak, no longer very important. Sovereignty, and because अब तो सबके पास almost एक जैसा system है. So nobody is in the threat कि ये मुझे exploit कर लेंगे, because new way of transactions have emerged. So this leads to many scholars to question the concept of Westphalian nation state. The kind of openness we have in that. It's another debate. We'll take it up some other time. Right now, we'll quickly look into the consequences in the post-Cold War international system. So as a consequence, as a result, क्या होता है post-Cold War era में? I'm going to read. There are 3-4 consequences. Let me read it out for you. So ethnicity and conflict. Now, dissolution of USSR resulted in a steady rise in ethnicity-based conflicts. Ethnicity, as in the cultural difference between people, and violence in the newly independent countries. जितने भी newly independent countries थे, especially ethnic-based conflicts वहाँ देखी गई. An ethnic war in former Yugoslavia inflicted a heavy toll on human life and split the country in several independent states. Yugoslavia में सबसे पहले number of secessionist movements based on ethnicity in the former Soviet bloc, especially in Moldova, Armenia, Uzbekistan, Georgia, they indulged in such wars. Other countries and regions like Sri Lanka, South Sudan, East Timor, Catalonia also witnessed a steady rise in violent ethnic conflicts. जहाँ भी minorities थे, those who felt unprotected, वहाँ ये ethnic conflicts ज़्यादातर देखी गई. ये तो Asian countries और East Europe की बात. Now African countries like Angola, Cyprus, Somalia, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Algeria, Nigeria, and others have also caught in ethnic, sectarian, or tribal conflicts and wars. These wars have created large human tragedies with violence, genocide, and crimes against humanity committed on a large scale. So restoration of peace and establishment of stable democratic governments remains a challenge. Ethnicity, religion, and culture became prominent or predominant in uniting the people, and the concept of a secular multi-ethnic nation state came under heavy criticism. Polarization happened along with the cultural pockets. कि हम इसी culture के साथ हैं, हम इसी culture के साथ हैं. So in states where multiple ethnicities existed, all these states became more vulnerable to conflicts. Whether you have multiple ethnicity in terms of religion, language, tribes, or cultures, these states they started feeling more threatened. So in 1992, Samuel P. Huntington, an American political scientist, proposed the clash of civilization thesis. Okay, so क्या है ये clash of civilization thesis? That predicted that conflicts along civilizational lines will be the primary source of conflict in the post-Cold War world, and which we have seen also in the post-Cold War period. अचानक से आपकी identity suddenly it has become more rigid and more important in terms of religion, language, caste, creed. He argued that future wars कैसे होंगे? They would be fought not between countries but between different cultures. The rise of identity politics has become a major issue in international relations in the post-Cold War period, as most of them are intra-state in nature. It's not between states but intra-state, within a state. And it is felt that these internal ethnic and other conflicts should be brought under the purview of international law and organization. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very devastating for the whole world. So the argument is that the international community cannot sit idly while killing of human beings go on in the name of ethnicity, religion, or tribe. States cannot excuse themselves by saying that these are my internal matter. Please don't interfere. Liberal internationalism demands that international community must step in to prevent, and if necessary, they should do it by using force against these crimes and genocides and ethnic cleansings. Thus, there began a collection of norms. They are broadly described as humanitarian international law. तो ये जो नीड फील हुई कि अंदर ही अंदर जो स्टेट्स जो हैं अपने अंदर सिविल वॉर्स कर रहे हैं, लड़ रहे हैं, तो इसको हम कैसे कंटेन करें? We need to have certain laws, international law. That's humanitarian international law. The concept of humanitarian intervention and the principle of responsibility to protect, R2P, responsibility to protect, became international norms. That you cannot, just because you don't belong to that country, it doesn't matter. It doesn't also mean that you should remain indifferent. ये responsibility पूरे world की है. So the idea of human security, which essentially means freedom from fear, freedom from want, emerged to protect individuals and communities from persecution and violence. Alright. So former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, and several other countries and regions saw humanitarian interventions in the aftermath of Cold War. The UN upgraded its mechanisms and in 2006 UN Human Rights Council was established, which replaced the UN Human Rights Commission. Now 2006 में Human Rights Council आ गया instead of Commission, and they started interfering in all those ethnic conflicts which were so-called internal matters of the state but needed intervention so that peace can be maintained in the world. So some analysts hold the view that the global agencies like UN need special mandate to intervene in this intra-state conflicts, that they need to take permission prior to that. But so far as the UN humanitarian interventions and the UN peacekeeping and peace enforcement missions have had a mixed record. They need to. Okay, so though the UN could establish peace among the conflicting interests and groups in some cases, but it happened only after a lot of human suffering. But still, they believe that to some extent they have a moral responsibility to interfere and to maintain peace in the world. All right. So ethnicity and conflicts के बाद दूसरा जो major problem देखा जा रहा है, or we say this is a consequence, is the rise of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism. Okay, this is what we have seen across the globe as a new problem. The defeat of USSR in its Afghanistan campaign led the Soviets to retreat from the country. So the geostrategic policies adopted by the US and USSR in the region gave birth to a new threat to peace in the form of rise of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism. Various mujahideen groups, which were primarily based along ethnic and sectarian lines, started conflicting with each other to secure power in that country, which means Afghanistan. So this process of grabbing the power also witnessed the birth of Taliban, another fierce Islamic fundamentalist group. The birth of Taliban started a new chapter in the history of Afghanistan. In the war against Soviet occupation, many foreign fighters were brought to Afghanistan. One such group was Al-Qaeda, headed by the Saudi-born Osama bin Laden. Al-Qaeda had its foreign fighters who were trained and armed by the US. They fought against Soviet army of these militant and terrorist groups, began looking beyond their spread of ideology and influence. It was Al-Qaeda which carried out the terrorist bombings in US. Everybody knows 9/11. So although there are several Islamic outfits like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Palestine Liberation Army in Palestine, their cause was political in nature, that is securing independence and sovereignty for the regions they are based in. The cause is political. The ambition is to gain more control over that region. Okay, so the US intervention in Afghanistan after 9/11 attacks and the declaration by President George Bush of war on terrorism has led to US interventions and regime change. The war on terrorism and US and NATO intervention in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria also witnessed the birth of several organizations like ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. The war on terrorism has changed the entire discourse of international relations. So one was ethnicity and conflicts, the other is terrorism, that has majorly changed the relations between the states and the nature of problem solutions or problem resolving. Third one is hegemonic attitude of US. ये हमें बहुत clearly देखने को मिलता है in the post-Cold War scene that after the Cold War period provided some amount of predictability and certainty in international relations, the fall of communist bloc, that is disintegration of USSR, allowed the USA and its allies to play a dominant role in world politics. Naturally, एक जीत का एहसास होता है, and that led them to realize that they are the only superpower left in the world. So the end of Cold War certainly expanded the US role from being the chief protagonist of capitalism to other areas such as global security, peacekeeping and peacemaking and peace enforcement, war on terrorism, etc., and further to the areas such as regime change, democracy promotion, human rights. हर area में US का intervention देखा गया. In the name of protecting the democratic regimes and to maintain international security, the post-Cold War era also saw US intervention in several countries. And these interventions are sometimes positive and sometimes also it is quite negative, because all the time US intervention was not found necessary. The Gulf War of 1991, US-led NATO intervention in Afghanistan in the post-9/11 period, invasion of Iraq without UN sanction, interventions in Libya and Syria, they are the examples of US and its allies' aggressive policies. So without taking permissions, without taking sanction from UN, it is seen that US has suddenly become very hegemonic. Hegemonic means that they have assumed the role of the center power. So they are also very pushy. They have become very dominant in the world politics. Okay, that's one of the developments in the post-Cold War era. Another development is sustainable development. The idea of sustainable development has emerged post-Cold War era. That is, we are talking about the politics post 1991. Now, what is sustainable development? Let's just read it out. The Cold War period witnessed massive rise in industrial activities. Obviously, technologically. So all these advancements in military technologies, nuclear programs, production of weapons of mass destruction, they were taking place in the Cold War period. Now, the accent was on military strength, building on military strength. All right. So the Cold War competition had no scope for the concept of an industrial order. It was rampant. Everybody was just engaged in some sort of building upon technology. So the Cold War competition had no scope for the concept of industrial order that would be environmentally sustainable. Nobody was conscious about environment at that time. All right. So the military budget of the countries at best included some spending on measures to reduce pollution and emissions in industrial activity. Whenever factories and all these acts were little bit talking about how to reduce noise pollution, air pollution, water pollution, all the emissions from industrial activities, how to take care of that. That is it. That was the only talk about environment at that time. So the environmental protection movements were also focused more on approaches which promoted pollution control strategies rather than adopting strategies which would change the production process itself. So environmental friendly processes in the manufacturing units was not talked about. Okay. Now, end of Cold War immediately impacted the international relations in the field of environmental protection also. This was also one of the fields which emerged in the post-Cold War era. Global environmental concerns have become common agenda in the international platforms. Unlike the Cold War era politics, which would prevent countries to come together to fight for common causes because of various reasons, economic reasons, etc. The post-Cold War era could successfully identify these concerns as common concerns. These were of common interest to everyone. From the Rio Summit of 1992, Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Climate Agreements in 2015, international community has gone a long way to undertake commitments to reduce emission of greenhouse gases and adapt technologies to mitigate climate change. Mid-1990s witnessed a substantial progress in bringing the countries together on a single platform to discuss the environmental issues. In 1995, first United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, this is UNFCCC, was held in Berlin. This conference was also known as Conference of the Parties, which expressed its concerns about the adequacy of countries, whether they are adequately equipped to handle these changes and their abilities, and they agreed on activities implemented jointly. First time they talked about environment, talked about climate change, etc. So this was the first joint measure in international climate action, which has been a continuous process ever since. So the whole exercise began in 1995, okay, when UNFCCC came into being, and then we have the Rio Summit, Kyoto Protocol, and other developments. So the idea of sustainable development, now which is so much prevalent and so common, took shape and became embedded as an important goal in the economic development strategies of developing also the developed countries. It's not like if they are developed, they are not working towards it, but also they are working to reduce or to best possible protect the climate environment. So although there are substantial issues that still need to be sorted out between the developed and developing countries, there is a imbalance, economic imbalance, but the end of Cold War has also hastened the process of forging understanding and cooperation between these countries along the lines of sustainable development. Everybody, all the countries, irrespective of their rank in the world order, they still believe that some efforts need to be done to protect the environment. All of us are under a common threat. Okay, right. And then the next one in the development in post-Cold War scenario would be migration and human rights issue. This is one very important issue which has come up recently in the post-Cold War era, that is post-1991. So the dissolution of USSR resulted in bitter ethnic conflicts that we have already seen in the former socialist states like Yugoslavia, which further split into several independent states. Ethnic cleansing was a common phenomenon in these conflicts. Severe human rights violations led to forced displacement, ethnic cleansing, and the problem of refugees and economic migrants. Right. So the United Nations then established the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, because Yugoslavian wars were so violent and so much killing went, and without thinking, so much destruction happened. It was very important for United Nations to intervene, and in the form of International Criminal Tribunal, it interfered and intervened in the matters of Yugoslavian people, where ethnicities, minorities, they suffered a lot. So this tribunal was established to prosecute perpetrators of serious crimes committed during the Yugoslavian wars. So the mechanism of International Criminal Tribunals, MICT, was the successor to ICTY. When this whole issue of Yugoslavia was reduced and kind of resolved, then this tribunal was replaced by mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals. MICT was established so that further, it can take care of the war crimes and also take care of the human rights issue. Okay, so both these tribunals were successful in convincing the war criminals. All right, the international events like war on terrorism, failed states, and rogue states, regime change, economic failures of states have produced huge numbers of intrastate and interstate migrations in the post-Cold War period. Obviously, so countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Rwanda, etc. have produced large number of migrants due to conflicts. Whenever a conflict happens, for example, when the Bangladesh war happened, and a lot of population, they migrated, they fled from their countries to nearby countries, like they came into India also, and they seek refugee in our country. So this concern for refugees is also a very important one. This is a major issue which the whole international community is thinking about. So addressing the concerns of refugees, displaced persons, and those fleeing the state violence, those who run away, like the Ukrainian situation right now. So and seeking protection to their lives, and human rights have become a main international issue nowadays, because human rights have become very, very important as far as a displacement of people is concerned. So migration and human rights issue together, by far, I think, is the most important issue across the globe, because so much movement is happening in the world. It requires a lot of thinking in terms of permanent, ideas, where we all can think of some cooperation at the international level, so that the refugees also do not feel insecure anymore. Okay. All right, so these were the consequences, what happened after post-Cold War period. Right now, what is the same, what are the new issues that we have discussed? There are three perspectives which have emerged in the international cooperation that I think I can take it up. Let me see the time. Okay. All right, so quickly we will see new perspectives on international cooperation. One is multilateralism. I'll just read it out to you. We have done it, and I'll just read it out to you. One, new perspectives on international, how to cooperate, how to maintain peace with each other. Three things have happened. One is multilateralism. One of the most important development that happened, and which has deeply influenced international relations at the end of Cold War, is the expansion of multilateralism. But what is multilateralism? Multilateralism it refers to alliance of multiple countries and their agreement to work together to achieve some common goals or to address some common issues. Okay, so multilateralism allows countries to take membership or to form an alliance in equal footage with any discrimination in any form. In that sense, it is opposed to unilateralism. Though the institutions like United Nations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, that is IMF, GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, they were the core form of multilateralism during the Cold War era, because they were all developed during that period, and they did play a vital role in diffusing Cold War tensions. The real essence of multilateralism, however, could be seen in the post-Cold War era, because in the Cold War era, they were still working under some sort of control. So formal establishment of WTO to institutionalize international trade relations, conclusion of many free trade agreements such as NAFTA, with soft free flow of goods and services, human resource between member countries, formation of new groupings and mechanisms like BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, creation of other economic initiatives and trade corridors, and infrastructural developments and connectivity like Belt and Road Initiative, as we talked about China, are the examples of growth in multilateralism at trade, political and security levels. These developments have significantly affected international relations after the Cold War and changed the discourse on polarity in general, and facilitated the rise of a multipolar world. As we talked, that the bipolarity in the Cold War, which was seen in terms of two blocks being created, has come to an end. So bipolarity of the Cold War has ensured stability and smooth functioning of the international system. But bipolarity led many times to modification of international set of standards and order by the agreements between the two superpowers. Because it was controlled only by two superpowers, it led to a lot of modification in international peacekeeping. So Cold War era was the finest example of how international order could be modified by agreements between US and USSR. Bipolarity had created a scenario where powerful states would influence the behavior of comparatively weaker states. So the weaker states, or let's say the newly small states, the new economies, they were always constantly under control. Unipolarity, on the other hand, explains how the most powerful state would influence the behavior of other states, with or without their approval. Some sort of unipolarity, which we were still experiencing in the form of US assuming the role of only superpower. So the actions of this powerful state may not be fitting into existing international norms or rules. So existing norms, in the sense that maintenance of peace is perhaps sometimes eroded by these kind of unipolar systems where only one single country is so powerful that it can dictate terms to others. For example, the US intervention in Iraq in 2003 was an act of unipolarity and a unilateral action by the sole surviving superpower. It was condemned by many countries, but however, nobody could do anything since the power was centered and exploited by one single country. So multilateralism or multipolarity, which has emerged now, have created more fluidity in international relations. Not one country is in charge or control, but all the small states are also engaged in trade and some other agreements between them. So the big powers do not have a do not have control on their movement all the time. So, as Miles Carter defines multilateralism as international governance by many, the growth of multilateralism and multipolarity also increased the importance of international organizations in the international relations. Now, when we look at international relations, we find that there is not a single pocket or two pockets of power. We have different pockets owing to the different issues which are coming up in the international arena. So, when the world is becoming more multipolar, and multilateralism, that is talks and organizations drawn between these countries for different reasons, for infrastructure development, for economic relations, primarily for economic relations, or for protection of certain issue like human rights, then the talks, the deliberation which is taking place between different countries at different levels. We have groups, different levels within the locations, within the economic interest. So this has given way to a multipolar world where the power is more decentralized. I think I would have to stop here today, and we will have to continue tomorrow, and we will complete this portion in the first 15 minutes, and then we'll start with the India's foreign policy. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Vishalji. Hello. Vishalji. 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 Hello. Hello. Is someone there? All right, then I'll see you tomorrow, everyone.